And like me, if you'd like to slow the momentum of the day down, sitting comfortably. With each exhalation, allowing your whole body to soften further. Remember that you are not trying to get anywhere or do anything. Simply allowing yourself to come to a point of rest. Comfortable stillness and ease. A few more minutes of this quiet, resting meditation. Pausing and allowing yourself to fall into the present moment. Letting go of whatever pattern carried you up until this point. For most people, it seems easiest to start with their physical body and beginning to release the patterns of holding that you might have going on. Softening that space between the eyebrows, your jaw, your neck and throat. Releasing your shoulders all the way down to your fingertips. Allowing your chest to empty of tension. Your belly to soften. And your whole back to become loose and free because you are sitting in an upright, comfortable position. And of course, your legs are released, especially if you're sitting. Just let go. And notice that as you soften your body and quiet, you may notice your emotions feeling more calm. You exhale and that vague sense of anxiety or frustration just starts to melt away. Not because you are trying to do anything, but because you're letting go of the pattern that's propelling it.
Shivers.
Are you warm enough?
Oh yeah, it was just one of those weird shivers.
Sure. Weird shivers. Classic Qigong
Yes. It's called the wiggle worm.
As your body softens and your emotions become calm, notice how much easier it is for your mind to settle into the present moment. Maybe it feels less spun up. Or on the opposite end, maybe it feels less drowsy and hazy. Things become more distinct and clear. Maybe colors feel more vibrant. Paying attention and letting everything go. Continuing to notice that relationship. Your body softens. Oh, suddenly your breath is a bit more easy, a bit deeper, less restrained. And oh, notice how that makes your emotions feel more calm, more settled and peaceful. Your heart feels a bit more easy simply being here. And oh, notice how that continues to quiet the mind. Less agitation in the mind, less distracted, perhaps. This is all one flow that we are releasing. A few more breaths. And then when you feel ready, warming and softening your hands, bringing life into your hands. Softening that point on the crown of the head. Center of the palm, relating to that point, the very tippy top of your head. Bai Hui point. All 100 yang channels, that's the way it's talking about the yang channels of the body meeting here, Bai Hui. Softening and awakening this space, but not adding tension to your shoulders or your neck. Dragging your fingertips especially in this line along the corner of the head here. You may notice that as you stir the chi and open this area up, that it helps to wake up and brighten your mind a little bit. And then same on the back of the head. Your thumb dragging along that line at the base of the skull. Some wonderful acupoints here. Remember, you don't want to push so lightly that your hand simply slides over your hair and barely touches your skin. You also don't want to push so hard that you trap the skin against the skull and make it difficult for fluid to circulate beneath that area. Also, don't move too fast or too slow to inhibit those processes, but instead you find this perfect level of pressure and speed, intensity, so that there's this sense of warmth and release beneath the skin. Warming the whole side and back of the neck, especially that space at the base of the neck, below C7. Continuing to soften your shoulder if you are a Qigong or Tai Chi practitioner. Make sure that all of this is opening rather than closing. Continuing until there's this sense of glowing warmth soaking into the tissues and radiating back out. You might feel that they grow softer or more alive in some way, but do pay attention to that change and just continue until you're done. Warmth from your palms, soaking into that space around the eyes, softening the space behind your eyes. How do you feel?
A lot of tension, kind of like in the chest,
Oh,
solar
sure.
plexus, rib area.
We'll get you loose.
Yeah, I think it's because I sleep on my shoulders.
Ah, yeah, so you're all compressed.
They're rolled forward, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Softening that space near the nose. Allowing your awareness to continue to soak into that space, feeling not just the surface of the skin or your fingertips, but the space beneath. Learning to start to feel inside the body. This is a wonderful bridge into feeling deeper and deeper into the body. All the layers. You can become more and more clear about what's happening on the inside. helping to circulate qi and blood, body fluids through this area. You might have lymphatic buildup in these areas, and you help release them. And notice with your own experience that if you push too hard, that it actually traps that fluid and causes problems with the circulation. And you can push just hard enough to reach into that space, move at just the right speed. Feeling that fascial layer beneath the skin, over the bone, over the musculature. Softening and opening that space between the eyebrows, especially if you're someone who tends to hold this space throughout the day. Help to release that pattern, softening up and down, just at the ends of the eyebrows and in between, and then soothing and smoothing it out. And allow me to say, for those people who are just joining us for the first time, not quite sure what we're doing, welcome. You're always welcome at these live practice sessions. But when you're just starting, it might be worth going down below to watch the video lesson, the introduction to this particular Qigong method, this healing method. That way you get the best results from it and it doesn't seem confusing. There's also a big list of all of the points that we're touching if you want to look up the acupoints. And all of that will make this much easier. And when you follow along with us, it keeps me from having to re-explain every practice every time. Softening that space at the end of the eyebrow, just on the outside of the orbital ridge around the eye. Usually it's just between the end of the eye and the eyebrow, depending upon the shape of your body.
Orbital.
The orbital.
That word.
Most of these 36 in both directions, but of course, do as many as you need to help your awareness soak in, to soften the area, to feel as though you've connected with and helped it open. And especially if it's a problematic space for you, please do spend extra time. Also the corner of the jaw. Your awareness continuing to connect with this area. Becoming good at feeling the space with your mind. not just the skin, but the space just beneath. And softening just in front of and just behind the ear. Warming, allowing heat to sink into and penetrate into the ears. easing open the front of the shoulder. All the way around the shoulder, we want to soften as much as possible so that it has the chance to be free. If it's stuck on any one side, any one aspect of the movement of the whole shoulder begins to freeze. One important principle of practice is that, well, medicine as well, but of life and conversation, is that if you want an obstruction, if you want tension or stagnation, a buildup of something, to be able to release and go somewhere, you have to be able to provide for it a space to go to. It's not going to evaporate. And so if your shoulder is clenched on the top and you want this to unclench, it has to be able to not be jammed up anymore. Because if I try to release it, but all of this is holding it up, there's nowhere for it to release to. And so I have to be able to soften outward, to find more space in the shoulder, more space in the front of the shoulder, more space in the back, underneath. And so as we release the most problematic areas, sometimes those areas are problematic because you haven't provided a space for it to release to. And this is true all throughout the body, simply biomechanically, energetically, emotionally. It's all the same. And it's not just about trying to dissolve the excess spaces, but trying to provide space for them to dissolve to. They don't just evaporate into the air.
Filling the balloon.
Filling the balloon. What do you mean?
Well, if we think about like the sense of buoyancy that can arise as we let go, like you were talking about, like we let go to a certain extent during standing practice, for example, such that we're no longer holding ourselves up through tension. There's just this kind of levity in the
That's
body,
right.
This buoyancy. And I think of it as like a balloon expanding. You know, maybe right now that balloon is twisted in certain places.
That's right.
Or collapsed in others. Actually, I think I probably heard ZhiCheng use that metaphor before. The balloon in the mattress.
That's right. Yeah. So in that metaphor, we can't fill the space if it's being compressed. The space, in order to fill, has to have room to expand into. That's one of the reasons to decompress, to no longer crunch down in our posture, hold ourselves, fold ourselves up. If we want to be able to fill and to open, we have to adjust ourselves in such a way that there's space to open into. And so that's the metaphor that Mel was using. To use that metaphor of the balloon to describe what I was talking about before with, if you're going to release an obstruction, you have to have a place to release it to. That would be more like if you're trying to deflate the balloon. But the little nozzle, the little space that the air escapes and moves from, if we keep that compressed, but we want to deflate the balloon of tension, there has to be a place for that air to go.
Yeah.
You have to release that end. Spigot? What would we call that? Nubbin?
I'm not sure. A nubbin, for sure.
The mouth. So in both cases, if you want to deflate excess areas, you have to have room to deflate to use this balloon analogy that Mel has committed us to.
Sorry.
But I'm trying to work with it. But also, as Mel was mentioning, that if you want to inflate, to reflate, to heal, you have to have room to inflate too. Because if you're compressed all the time, there's no room within which for you to, there's no space to add extra chi and spaciousness into. And so as you practice, notice those places that seem especially problematic and difficult. If it is a space that feels like it is full, there's a lot in it, and you're trying to help it disperse, search the area around it physically. That's one simple way to do it, to see if you're compressed next to it. And so there's no place for it to release to. And to use Mel's metaphor of the inflating the balloon, if you're trying to, for instance, fill your breath, but your abdomen is compressed and tight all the time, there's no space for your breath to compress to. So it's forced up into your lungs or your throat, like a toad expanding.
Your head becomes the balloon.
Your head becomes the balloon, it does, and it fills with all kinds of stuff. And what we want to do is empty the head and fill the belly.
We have a Del, by the way.
Oh, welcome, Del. Oh, Del. Our Del is an awesome Del. So I hope that gives a sense of what we're trying to do. If you find a problematic space, look downstream a little bit to see if you can open that particular waterway to help it soften outward. If your shoulder is being stuck and you're just having trouble getting it to relax, maybe check downstream toward the elbow to see if you're holding, either just habitually holding, or maybe you're gripping all of the time. And so this is so obstructed that this can't let go. And so instead, focus on learning to soften your hands, soften your forearms, and then maybe there's space there for this to soften through, and that may open things up. And similarly, if your breath is obstructed, then perhaps notice which way you are compressing the breath. In what way are you using up the space that the breath would normally find its way into? And see again if you can let that go. Because in both cases, to become more full or to disperse in excess, we have to let go. So understanding that mechanism to be more skillful in our letting go can be tremendously helpful and effective. And it's one of the reasons that we like to focus on learning to soften the hands first and soften the neck first in posture, because now we have both ends open and it's a little bit easier to release the things from the middle outward, to lengthen outward. Because if you start trying to open in the middle, but there's just a bunch of rocks piled on top of your balloon, you're blowing as hard as you can, but it's not able to inflate the balloon. Instead, you remove the obstructions from the outside, and then from the inside, it's more likely to be able to release. Is that you playing air drums? Mm-hmm. But you can find that principle in every part of our lives. The next time you're in an argument with somebody and you want to help them, well, hopefully help both of you change your mind. But if somebody just has an intractable opinion, sometimes the difficulty isn't with giving them new facts and new data. Sometimes it's giving them a space for their old opinion to go. You have to give them an out, a safe space for their ego or for whatever it is, some place where that mental tension, that buildup can go. You probably noticed that if you try to intellectually back somebody into a corner when you disagree with them, all they do is hunker down and harden their position. There's no place for them to go intellectually or emotionally. And so if you create a space within which they can go, oh, that's why, or there's a place where you can find a concession or some way for their opinion and emotional energy to express itself, then they're able to change. And I know that's very vague. It's a very difficult subject to talk about. Something Mel and I were talking about earlier. Yeah. And there's definitely an art to it, but it's that same skill. When you're trying to disperse or release a hardness, it has to have some place to go. There has to be some space downstream for the water to drain. And then the neat thing is that it maybe drains all on its own. So your job isn't to try to force things to change, but instead to make more space for that person or that idea or that process so that it can change itself.
Throwing out the frozen waffles.
Would you like to explain that, Jill?
Yeah, ZhiCheng uses a funny phrase called throwing out. We're trying to throw out the frozen waffles. And I think, although I haven't confirmed this with him, that he's referring to ego waffles.
Right.
Which are spelled
well, there's two G's, right?
There's two G's.
It's like ego.
Like ego.
Master ZhiCheng is a really big fan of puns. Terrible, terrible puns. And we love it. And Mel has carried on that particular burden. If I'm the lineage holder for Qigong and the Tai Chi, Mel is the lineage holder for terrible, terrible puns. They've infiltrated our home. And so ZhiCheng will often say, throw out the old frozen waffles. Get rid of the ego.
Hope that helps.
It's fantastically helpful. So again, as you soften these spaces, notice where they are softening to. One of the directions that they can soften is not just downstream, perhaps toward the fingers. One of the directions is also outward toward the surface, because contraction happens in all directions. And so often we are contracting toward the center, pulling toward the bone. And as we soften this layer just beneath the skin on top of the musculature, this whole joint and this whole space can also find a way to open outward, as though the flesh fills out. In Chinese, they talk about throughness as tong and to. Tong is like this way, through, going through. To is like outward, like the way a sponge fills. And so part of what we're releasing and filling about is this movement outward toward the surface, as well as in. Things spread out and fill. And you start to feel your tissues kind of becoming spongy and full, and it's very interesting.
This might be getting too into the weeds. Does the turbid, the tension, the weight, so to speak, in the body have to sink before that expansion? Or is it? The
more it can release, the more space there is for the expansion. I don't think you have to be completely released. Like, that's a very high bar.
Yeah, it's not like a particular order.
No, yeah. Like you see Master ZhiCheng dancing around and he's just as light as air because he's let everything go. But I think that's a pretty high bar. So I think that if you are 1% softer, either, for instance, with gravity has to go through, it has to go down. As in Chinese medicine, the damage that's happening is happening because we're obstructing the flow of nature. And so gravity, or at least this force that's vertical, we have to be able to release it by not gripping and holding ourselves. So we arrange ourselves upright so that then we can release all of that weight out of our body into the ground. And as Mel was mentioning, even a 1% change, being 1% softer, is fantastically healing. Makes more space for the breath, more space for the space around it to release, which helps other spaces to release, which helps the mind to quiet, which makes it easier to soften. And that cycle continues. So even if it feels like a really difficult undertaking, especially if you compare yourself to people like Master ZhiCheng, as I was getting to do this morning in my lesson with him, then our mind says, oh, that's too difficult. But really all you have to know is that everything's related. And if you can soften one finger, 1%, which all of you can, especially you, then that will help the next finger to soften 1%. And you simply continue letting go and letting go. And everything leads into everything else, because everything is downstream from something else. Continuously letting go, connecting, making space. Wait until you have that sense of stillness and settling. Perhaps a sense of warmth cultivating in your middle dantian space. Don't rush too quickly past it. Thank you for my drink.
Welcome. Do you need more?
No. Barley tea. Muji cha.
Bless you.
It's barley tea.
Oh.
Oh, mugi cha.
Mugi cha.
Muji is the teacher. Mugi is the tea. I first learned it from Mari-san. During summer, she would serve cooled barley tea because it's cooling on a hot day. Continuing to soften. Oftentimes, if people have difficulty sinking their chi down and staying settled and connected, sometimes, again, it's because it's being obstructed through here. And so by learning to soften the solar plexus, soften the belly, we soften the ribs, then there's space for this to expand and it's easier for it to release. And so if this is one of your obstructions, then spend some time clearing that obstruction. And you might find it much easier to settle your awareness downward and to root your chi. Especially for people that have a lot of liver chi constraint, a lot of frustration and anger, and all this trapped resentment. It forms a little barrier through here. A little wall of ice and fire. People don't want to go in here because here there be dragons. But by softening that space, you have to let it open and become free. And then it's that much easier for things to settle through and to become rooted. And just remember that when you release those dragons, they also have to have some place to go, and it is not your partner.
That's right.
Or your boss.
Duly noted.
Or your kids. Definitely not your dog. Maybe your cat. Your cat can probably take it.
No.
Instead, you want to take all that chi and let it transform. And what does it transform into?
Kindness.
Kindness, humaneness, friendliness, creativity, generosity. If you're feeling especially generous, you can go outside and share these methods with people. Or you can head over to my Patreon page.
Nice.
But it's all the same chi. It's all that same expression. You want to let it be free. There's that famous idea of the frustrated, angry artist. And it's because these people have a huge amount of that creative, inspirational energy wound up inside them, and they may not be able to get it all out. They may have never learned how to express themselves. And so instead, this powerful creative mind is just trapped inside the head and the body and the emotions of a rage addict. So oftentimes artists need the most support to express that huge bounty of creative energy, liveliness that's inside them. So instead of just being self-destructive, they end up being a gift to the world. Too many great artists trapped in cubicles.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
Mm-hmm. It's all just liberty. It all just builds up and builds up. So if that's you, please go out. Find somebody to share your gift with. It's amazing for a lot of the people that I've talked to over the years that are very angry or have all this pent up energy inside them, for them to realize that it's not anger. It's just chi. It's stuck chi. They don't realize they have this giant treasure trove of energy inside them. They've just been feeling depressed because it's held in a box. And all they have to do is go out and give some love, be kind, share their gift with the world. Usually those people know exactly what that is, what it looks like, how to do it. They're just blocked. Emotional constipation. Set it free. And again, that key to setting it free is www.patreon.com. I'm just kidding. I mean to say, it's somebody as close as your neighbor or your kids or your dog. Somebody that you can immediately show kindness and love to. So easy. When you go out and you find your neighbor, you share with them, you give some love. Sometimes the hardest place to do that is within ourselves. So maybe sometimes it's better to start with even your cat.
Or especially your cat.
Wait until everything feels settled and grounded, easy. Be gentle and kind with yourself, even just in this small physical way. Just this gentle, loving touch, this willingness to wait for whatever change needs to happen. Just that can be transformative. Sometimes it can be hard to be kind to ourselves in other ways, but this is something you can do. softening open this whole inguinal space. Remember that if for you the tension is over here or further inside, you can always work that area. We're here in stomach 30, easing this space open. You can also perhaps use your palms on this tight bundle of tension here for most people in the hips. And again, I'm sitting like this just to make it easier to see, but you can sit however you'd like. I'm kind of in this awkward angle. But this whole space can be eased open. And then, when you're ready, soften your hands around your belt vessel. Make sure that you don't twist your shoulders. You can use the backs of your hands if it's uncomfortable. I know some people have arthritic pain here, and so turning like this is a big ask. But you can use this part, unless the pain is here, in which case you could use the backs of your hands. You could also just use one arm if one hand is especially painful. And just take the time to connect with your back, nourishing and warming that space. I won't spend quite as long here today because I want to put a little bit more time in the lower body. But if this has been really helping your back, taking this time, then let us move on and you just stay here, letting all that warmth and life soak into the back, softening that tissue there. This whole series was especially helpful for me when I had incredible low back pain. It was actually one of the very few things that ever helped my back pain. And so please take the time to enjoy it if that is you. Especially when I was doing all that standing and my spine was straightening out. It was very uncomfortable.
I can imagine.
There were whole years where I would stand up just from a chair and my back would go because it was moving and all this fluid had to readjust. And I gained, I don't even know, an inch in height. I was always bad about measuring myself, but I was definitely taller. So my spine became much more aligned. And those kinds of adjustments, of course, are not always comfortable. But as they happen, you want to, again, make room for them. Some of the reason it was very painful for me is because I didn't understand that principle of making space for the change. And so I was still gripped all around my spine. But then I forced my spine to change, and all it did was push into all of these old obstructions. It would have been much wiser for me to learn how to release all of this away from my spine and then to start it moving, as well as doing other Qigong practices, but I didn't know them at the time.
And it was snake and turtle Qigong specifically that helped you?
Snake and turtle was a huge benefit. It was standing in snake and turtle, and I was doing way too much standing at the time because I had studied I Chuen, which is a standing method. And the guy was telling us to stand 3 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
And not in a soft way. I didn't know how. It certainly forced change in my body, but it wasn't healthy. And this is something I've got other videos about, talking about the mistakes I was making. Following wrong teachers, wrong method. If you're applying force to your body, it always ends up being really dangerous and usually only short-term benefits. You have to learn to release the body. But I didn't learn that until ZhiCheng Shufu, coming all the way back over here. I was practicing the other methods. Some of you may know, I used to have a whole channel teaching other methods. And I deleted everything.
I think there's still one video floating around on YouTube of you when you were in your early 30s.
Yeah, Khalil was a guy who visited. He's a movie documentarian guy. He still has stuff on his channel of me.
Yeah.
But not official videos. It was just him with his slow camera. He had come to the farm that I was living on, which is still a retreat center in Costa Rica now. But when drone technology was becoming big, and he said, I want to take photographs of your property. We said, okay. So he lived with us, and we had this little drone zipping around. It was pretty fun. I had some, we were doing Qigong, and we had this drone flying overhead over the river. Pretty funny. Yeah, the difficulty with a lot of those practices, like long standing and standing with tension, these things, is the same principle that we're talking about. We haven't learned how to open the body to allow a place for things to go. So we end up standing and drawing energy in and accumulating, but we're accumulating in a space that's still tight. It's not free. And so you just double your accumulation. You end up getting more of whatever you have. If there's pent up emotional energy, like we're talking about this space in the middle, if that's not completely free, if we are not emotionally balanced, then we do all of this chi gathering. Standing is really good at that. And it just adds more to that space of compaction. And the only way for it to release is usually through explosions and other problems. And this is a very common problem in Qigong circles. There's all of these methods about releasing internal demons, starting fire. They call it dragon sickness, all of these fun names. And people that have delusions or a strong imagination, all of this chi rushes into their head and suddenly they're seeing hallucinations. People that tend to have a lot of paranoia or just basic fear, like it turns into genuine paranoia and it actually stops them from living their lives. If they tend to have, anything, big emotions, they're angry people, they become rageful people because you get more of whatever you have. If you've cultivated peace and then you very carefully blow on those embers of peace and your chi fills and your body is released and your channels are open, then it becomes this wondrous expansion of energy and light and spiritual growth. The quietness turns into wisdom and all of these things. But most people jump to step 10 and all they do is make everything worse. They become sex addicts. They become, major drug addicts. They start searching. They're never able to rest. It's wild. And it happens. It's incredibly common. It's really sad because people are usually doing it because they're trying to heal. But they don't understand that first they have to clear the space. That's like we were talking about sweeping before you mop. You have to get rid of things. You have to make room for things to leave. We have to just be able to soften this. Just this is a huge skill. And if we can't release all of this before we start trying to pack chi into it, all we do is quadruple the level of tension and disconnection. It's not complicated. And it happens all the time. So there's a definite order to these things. And the first steps are always letting go, becoming quiet, rebalancing our health in basic ways. And like I was joking about the other day, cleaning your house. All of these qualities, the really easy things, they have to come first. Then we start doing all of the wild alchemical stuff. your mind wanders away, you let it come back, settling in. Ooh, it's oversteeped. How do
You
you
want me to
hips?
add more water?
No, thank you. That's good. I appreciate it, though. You're always very kind. Except when your liver chi is exploding. Nothing. Hey, that looks good. Nice job.
What?
Good hip opening.
Really?
Yeah. Getting better all the time. Softening and softening and letting go. If we have trouble letting go and when we're standing and we're still holding on to layers of tension, this, of course, is one of those areas where we might be gripping. Very commonly, the calves are one of the last things to release. They just tend to kind of be this solid pack against the back of the leg. So you want this sense of the calves almost releasing upward. It's very interesting. You can soften the feet and everything falls through the legs. And the more you can soften your legs and release around your knees, your lower legs, your feet, the easier it is for the weight to fall out of your body. Because once it falls out of your body, then there's more space for other things to release. But for a while during practice, everything is just backed up and stacked up on top of your legs. And so when people practice that way, usually they get this continual increase in stagnation, and it makes them feel really strong. I had that for a long time. And if you feel strong, that's usually a bad sign because it means something's pushing against something else. It should feel like nothing. But people love to feel strong, especially young guys in the martial arts, in my experience. They love that. So we have to learn to just be comfortable feeling like it's effortless, easy. Taking the time to soften, you can pull on each one of your toes the way we pull on our fingers. Spreading open the bones on your feet. Remember that we are also accumulating softness in the hands. As you accumulate enough softness in your body, it starts to transform.
It's interesting how one side can be so much more stiff than the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's usually like that. And then when one side's easier, we tend to do everything on that side, so it just makes the whole loop. Yeah. That's why I try to brush my teeth with my left hand and do all these things with my left hand, just to keep this side half awake. Yeah.
It's really smart.
Playing the guqin has been really helpful also, since maybe most of it's the left hand.
Oh. Yeah, for me, it's the right side, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It.
Oh. Woo! It's so bitter, but I keep drinking more of it. Mind if I steal this?
Nope.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start bringing up like a little plate or something so you can put the tea bag on the plate.
Oh.
Put the tea bag in and just brought it up.
I appreciate that you did it. It was really kind. Always taking care of me. Also going straight to the lying down part. Softening open through your hips, releasing your lower back, letting it spread open. Remember to allow your legs to lengthen, your spine to lengthen, your arms releasing from the shoulders. Everything gets longer. only as far as feels comfortable. Engaging your feet, lengthening your spine from your tailbone to the top of your head, and then continue lengthening as you fall around the circle. Make sure that you don't pull down with your thighs. If you like to lay flat, of course, you're welcome to. You're welcome to put a pillow beneath your knees or your lower back. You want to make sure everybody's nice and comfortable. You can put a pillow beneath your head or your arms. Find a way that's comfortable for you. Allow your breath to be easy and for your mind to spread out through your body. You're welcome to stay in this position until your body lets go, releases in this entirely new way. Once you feel that kind of settling, that direction of letting go, you're welcome to move back into a seated position. Some days it may take longer. With settling into your dancian or relaxing to the floor, there are those days where it takes 5 or 10 minutes for you to let go, even after practice. And usually that means those are the days you really need to spend that extra 10 minutes to let go. So please do just make space in your life so that things can change. Sometimes it's just a matter of making time. As like in the body, if we don't make space for things to be able to move and change, they can't. If you don't make time in your life for things to move and change, they won't. So find a way to make those empty spaces. And those are usually the alchemical chambers within which transformation occurs. And it's up to you to make room for those things. And enjoy your practice.
Mucho gusta. I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay.
At least not yet. Yeah, Adele makes a good point about standing practice. He says, if you're standing that long consistently without strong fundamentals, I bet it is bad for you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he says he has 2 questions.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's specifically rough on your kidneys. It's rough on your joints. And yeah. You can stand in such a way that you let everything fall through. And so instead of stacking up onto your body, for instance, there's all this space that happens. It's like the body expands upward and outward, that balloon quality, if we let go enough so there is room for that expansion. So there isn't the feeling of the joints stacked up on top of each other.
Oh, Ray's here.
Ray!
Says he made it through the whole thing. Thanks.
Oh, wonderful. And if you have any recommendations, Ray, on what we're talking about, it's always nice. This whole 100-day series, we're trying to make it as much about talking about the basics and important ideas as possible. So I have people trapped in a room with me. But you know a ton, Ray, so we're always happy to hear from you.
We're 80% through.
Amazing. Today's day 80?
Uh-huh.
Wow. It's amazing how many people have been coming consistently or doing it on their own consistently. It's just fantastic.
Ray says, stagnation of liver qi would cause vivid, disturbing dreams? Question mark?
It definitely can, yeah. Vivid, disturbing dreams. Usually when we think about things like that, it's in Chinese medicine, at least, we talk about more like heat agitating the heart. And so, but that can come from liver qi stagnation. There's the idea that liver qi is kind of like a diesel engine. It compacts and compacts, and when it does, it heats up. And that heat goes places. Sometimes it goes into the stomach and disturbs digestion. Sometimes it rushes up into the lungs, and people get, a nervous cough, this kind of thing, this sort of feeling, or into their head, and they get migraines. But often, if that heat agitates the heart, then they will get dream disturbed sleep a lot. But also, the liver function more or less is associated with the hun, that ethereal spirit, which is related to the dreams. And so that's part of it as well, because the idea is that the blood is supposed to be able to sink down into the liver when you sleep, and everything that yin enfolds the yang with an embrace, and you fall asleep. And so if the liver blood, for instance, is not nourished enough, then there's this, you're just lying in an uncomfortable bed. The bed's not made, and you're kind of laying there rolling around, and it's not quite the same. And so if you're asleep and that's happening, then it's dream disturbed sleep. But if it's like fever kind of dreams, like you feel hot and agitated, then that's often heat in the heart. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was talking to my friend about this the other day, and she was wondering if the quality of dreams we experience, in this case, vivid or feverish, are essentially like the releasing of suppressed emotions during the day.
Interesting. I think from the Western perspective, it seems to be that that's one of the places that we work through our psychological compressions and things throughout the day. It's a really interesting point. And that would be a liver qi stagnation expression. Like you're compressed during the day, and at night you decompress. And so people get the shaking as their nervous system finally releases, or their mind spins because it's not being held anymore.
We were talking specifically about cringy dreams. Like we would have dreams of like really embarrassing moments that occurred years ago. And I can imagine that like as those events unfolded, we were suppressing them in certain ways.
Yeah, it could be.
And then but who knows?
Who knows?
I don't know.
But it's also true. Like I've noticed that like sometimes I'll take melatonin when I go to sleep, if I have to fall asleep fast or something, and I'll get wild dreams from that. So I don't take it very often.
I've heard that from several people.
Yeah. So that could be part of it as well. Like it could be sometimes a medication that people are taking, or one of the wildest nights of sleep I ever had was when I was traveling up and down the coast of California with a band, and the person that was hosting the gig paid for a hotel. And I was 15 or 16 or something, traveling in this bus with these people. And they stopped and they bought me Indian food. I'd never had Indian food. It was really spicy. And I kept everybody up all night long talking in my sleep. And I was having crazy dreams. And it's because of this spice coming up, the heat agitating the heart. And I had a lot of heart problems at the time. And so sometimes it's just the food you eat.
And it looks like we're still waiting for Del. Del, if you still had a couple questions you wanted to ask, we would be more than happy to.
Yeah, I can't wait too long. Thanks for the good questions, Ray. It's nice to talk about this stuff.
Okay, so his first question is, what is your definition of consciousness?
Of course
if you
it
could,
is.
Like, just answer very quickly.
Yeah, I have a couple sentences.
And what would Taoism have to say about the non-locality of consciousness, i.e., there is no space between my mind and your mind. There is only one collective mind.
It's a really good question, and I don't know that I know the answer. I think we should ask ChatGPT. But the nature of consciousness, one, I guess, is that it's the nature of consciousness. I think it is safe to say that it is not what we think it is. And so whatever our conception of it is, it's going to be wrong. So it's useful to not try to keep a conception of it. In the same way, like the idea of self, if you have ideas of self, then it's extra hard to let go of them in order to change, to find something new. Because again, we need to make space in order to learn new things. And so if we have fixed concepts, then it makes it hard for them to change. And so if we're studying consciousness, it's actually really useful to not try to define it beforehand. Otherwise, you're just going to have to let go of that too, because no matter what we defined it as, it's going to be wrong. And so I think there's a reason that a lot of Daoist texts and teachers and things will like, okay, here's an idea, but it's completely wrong. Like they say it at the top, and that's that first line, the Dao Ke Dao Fei Chang Dao Ming Ke Ming Fei Chang Ming. Like whatever we say in the Dao De Jing, it's going to be wrong. Like you can't talk about it. And so I think a lot of the time it's useful to hold these ideas lightly. And so it's a super interesting question. One, I don't know that I could give a good answer. And two, it might be a bad thing to give a good answer, even if I could. So it's kind of interesting. But I totally recommend you making an appointment with Master ZhiCheng and asking him. Or ask Ray. If Ray's here, Ray would love to answer that question.
Yeah, I get so confused when I think about like the differences between mind, spirit, consciousness, awareness.
I was actually talking about that with Master ZhiCheng this morning.
Really?
Yeah, and Shifu had all these fun ideas. He was saying, well, what about this? Because he likes to ask questions in response to my questions that make it seem like a ridiculous question. And so, yeah. The subject matter is deep and wide, of course, and I don't claim to be an expert, so I feel like I would be making it up if I tried to come up with a good answer. So to avoid doing that, I'll just say you should talk with ZhiCheng Shifu, and he'll probably ask you questions instead of give you answers also, which is a very Taoist thing. But part of what we're trying to do, what he would be trying to do, and what he was trying to do for me, is to ask me questions as a way to destroy some of my ideas so that I could make more space, so that I could find what was true, but without the words, but through direct experience. Because that's always the goal of these practices, isn't to give answers in the sense of here's an idea, but instead for us to relate to the truth in a different way that couldn't be found through answers or books or some random guy on the internet. So hopefully what we're doing is making more space so that the wisdom can flow in rather than just information. That is my internet bullshit answer, so that I don't have to try to say, because we're still waiting for Ray to give us a good answer.
Ray is contemplating the void.
That is the perfect answer, Ray.
Oh no, he didn't say that. I said that.
No, I'm just saying it's he's responding with stillness, which is
that's right. Yeah.
That's right.
Dill asks, do you think humans are only conscious or animals too?
Conscious of what? Self-conscious? I've been around animals my whole life, and I've seen animals get neurotic and paranoid, have deep fear responses and personality problems and things like that. And so it's a good question. I guess it depends on what line we're talking about within that. Just like you're saying, what's the nature of awareness? Do they have to be able to refer to themselves in the first person in order to be conscious? Can they be afraid of a patch of grass that they remember a snake being in before, and it really affected them, and now they're nervous all the time, and they have dreams, because we know animals dream. So that goat in the field that saw a snake, I'm thinking of a goat in particular that we helped raise, Sammy. Sammy was raised under our bed. And that goat would have all kinds of wild dreams. And it had its mom died when it was young, and it clearly had some anxiety. And like, is that required for consciousness, or is that just chi flow? I don't know if I know a good answer. So instead I will sit here cross-legged and look wise and say, the answer is within you. But for 99.90, no. Life is a teacup. It is the empty space within that matters, because it is now in me, but can occasionally be bitter.
now define you.
Thanks, everybody. I love you. I appreciate you. I'm going to go off and consume food and then lie down. Yeah, thanks, Ray. I appreciate you being here. Such a nice group of people. Hey, Ray, where I think the plan is for the next 100-day cycle, we're probably going to be continuing these practices. And so we think that the next one will be like a mixture of Baduanjin and standing and shoulder release, like aiming for this shoulder softening sequence just to spend an hour and a half doing that every day for 100 days. So if you'd like to join us, I think we could all use the help. Thanks, everybody.